Sami al-Arian is Professor of Public Affairs and Director of Center for Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Zaim University. He joins us from Istanbul. Sami, there's been so much concern these past several days about the fragility of the ceasefire, and many had worried it could collapse at any moment. With the release of these names of captives that are scheduled to be released on Saturday now, where do you think things stand?
Well, this is the sixth round. Tomorrow will be the sixth round where hostages or captives will be released. We have 16 Israelis that have already been released and 5 Thai workers. Tomorrow, another 3. That makes it 19. So I think we're on track to finish the first stage with 33 Israeli captives being released in exchange for 1,900 Palestinians, a little over 1,900. So I think as far as the first stage is concerned, we're on track. The problem hasn't been really the release of the captives or the hostages. The problem has been that the Israelis haven't been fulfilling their part of the bargain, which is to allow 600 trucks every day. They have been only allowing fewer than 100 a day, with the exception that once Hamas threatened that it will withhold the new round, they started accelerating these releases. Yesterday, there was over 800 trucks, and today also there are more than 600, which makes it easier to fulfill each part, their bargain, their part of the bargain, which is to fulfill the parts of the first stage.
So, Sami, if you're talking about commitments going forward, I want to ask you about where you think things stand when it comes to phase 2 of the ceasefire, because what had been originally planned was, for now, discussions to be going forward about trying to implement phase 2 and negotiate the implementation of phase 2. So where do you think things stand with that?
Unfortunately, they were supposed to start on day 16th, and we've passed that last week. So we're a week into these negotiations that never started. And I think Netanyahu did not want to start it until he gets a green light from Trump, basically allowing him to resume the war whenever he thinks he could. But I don't think Trump allowed him to do that. And therefore, now the negotiations are in earnest. It's not clear what the final status would be. But I think the Americans, as well as the Palestinians and some Arab mediators, are trying to push this very hard. I think the bottom line is going to be what the American position would be if Israel wanted to resume the war, and whether Trump will give them a green light or not. Otherwise, we will go into the second phase. My prediction is that Trump does not need a war, does not want a war. He tried to actually stump Netanyahu when he was in Washington, telling him, what do you want? He said, I want to dislodge Hamas from Gaza. He said, I'm going to get every Palestinian out of Gaza, which Netanyahu, that's one reading of what he was trying to do. And therefore, I think we're going to get into the second stage. The question is whether we will end the second stage with a complete ceasefire or not, and complete withdrawal. That remains to be seen.
Sami, you're talking about U.S. President Donald Trump's stance thus far and how it has complicated things. And I want to ask you about the kind of rhetoric we've been hearing from Trump since he took office at the start of his second term, where he's been talking about forcibly displacing Palestinians who live in Gaza. Now, in the last few weeks, you've heard more and more from Arab countries who have flatly rejected this idea. They've been unified in their stance. And yet, in the last 24 hours, the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has indicated to American media outlets that they're still waiting to hear from Arab states on their plan going forward. What more do you think we are going to be hearing from Arabs, and what will the Americans be expecting from them?
I think that's Trump being Trump. If you go back to his book, The Art of the Deal, what he does is trying to shock the other side. And with his announcement, I think everybody who knows anything about the Middle East knows that whatever he's been saying has nothing to do with reality. There is no way that he could displace the Palestinians or expel them from their land in Gaza. He made that announcement in order to change the lines in which the Arabs would respond. So he wants Hamas to be out of Gaza, at least the leadership, not to be ruling Gaza. So he put a proposal that is unrealizable, hoping that the Arabs would come back with a definite plan in which there would be other means of the so-called the day after. So Hamas would not be part of the ruling of Gaza. And that's, of course, a tall order, because that's what Israel has been trying to do for 15 months with total destruction and killing and massacres, with starvation and the denial of all basic needs. But Trump is trying to get that without having to pay much price. I believe that we are into very difficult negotiations. At the end, Trump would have to realize that he may not be able to do what he wants, but he had to accept what the Arabs, which would basically be a reconstruction of Gaza with some role, not a prominent role, but with some role for Hamas, at least when it comes to security.
All right, Sami, al-Arian, thanks so much for joining us on Al Jazeera. We appreciate it. Menachem Klein is a professor of political science at Bar-Ilan University. He joins us from West Jerusalem. Menachem, so this leg of the ceasefire is back on track and going to plan after 3 days of great uncertainty. How do you read the events of the past several days?
There was a debate in the Israeli cabinet, the decision makers, whether to break the agreement, resume the war, or not. And it led, fortunately, it led to continue. It seems so that Israel will agree to continue. It will provide a list of Palestinian prisoners to be released tomorrow. There was a high pressure inside the Israeli administration to continue. Israeli public opinion put pressure to continue, unlike Netanyahu's interest to stop the process to go back to war.
Menachem, this part of the ceasefire is also supposed to involve negotiations on phase 2, which involves the Israeli military withdrawal from Gaza. Is there any political appetite for this in Israel right now?
Political appetites exist only among the opposition or the very few opposition parties. The key question is whether the next stage must include the end of the war. Ending the war is against Netanyahu and his cabinet interest. They want to remain in power. They know that if the war ends, they face inquiry commission, early elections, and perhaps a new coalition. That's the key issue here. So we have to wait and see whether there is an agreement on the next stage or not.
Menachem, we've heard so much from Donald Trump these past few weeks when it comes to Gaza, whether it's his threat to, unleash hell if the captives weren't released, or also this idea of forcibly displacing Palestinians from Gaza. I want to ask you about the impact of Trump's comments on Israel's calculations going forward.
There are indications that Trump's idea came from Israel, from Prime Minister, from the office, from the cabinet. There are enough indications showing it. The discourse inside the Israeli public in social media is supporting the expulsion, supporting ethnic cleansing of Gaza. The mainstream, almost all, let's say about 90% of the Israelis, of the Israeli Jews, they support ethnic cleansing. If it comes from Trump, they can say it's not me, it's Trump. But they support it. There is a big shift in Israeli public opinion. Once they denied the Nakba, they said, no, Nakba never exists. Now they say, Nakba, we are in favor of it.
All right, Menachem, let me ask you, when it comes to the public in Israel, what's the sense right now when it comes to the ceasefire? Do more people in the public in Israel want to see it continue?
They want to see it continue as long as there are Israeli hostages there. What will happen if all hostages are back at home, including soldiers and including the bodies of the killed, soldiers and civilians, and then resuming the war? I assume that the Israeli public will support resuming the war under any excuse, regardless what the agreement says.
All right, that's Menachem Klein, professor of political science at Bar-Ilan University, joining us from West Jerusalem. Thanks so much, Menachem.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.